But at the same time, I think as a note of caution as to how people, what is expected of the sovereign wealth funds. If you look back to most of the Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds, they started in the 70s and some even in 1956. And for many decades, just grew the funds and only became really active at the turn of the 90s. And so there must be time and gestation period given for these funds to season and be able to develop their investment policies to the point that they can actually become impactful. In Nigeria, the background is very simple. We have these boom and bust cycles, and different vehicles were created to manage the excess funds. The latest was what was described as excess crude oil account. But again, that didn't have a law backing it, didn't have a governance principle. And so in 2011, the Nigerian government started the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority, backed by an act of parliament, with clear rules as to what the fund does, how it's managed, how it's governed, and what the fund should do. That brings me to my second point as to the funds itself. So at the NSIA, we have three funds, and these are three ring-fenced funds. And what that means, it's really been challenging explaining that to politicians. Ring-fence means ring-fence. You can't put money from one to the other. And so it's quite interesting explaining that. And the first fund is a stabilization fund. And the stabilization fund's role is to provide stabilization support in times of economic crisis. And this is the only fund that the government can touch. The rules are very clear. If the government needs money, they'll write us a letter. Within 7 days, we'll make some funds available, which means that that fund is kept in liquid instruments. Returns are very challenging in this environment, but at least that's what that fund is for. And the law also says that 20% minimum should be put in each one of our three funds. The second fund is the Future Generations Fund. And this is a fund that is designed to provide intergenerational equity. And again, the law says minimum 20% must be in that fund. And then the third fund is the Nigeria Infrastructure Fund. And this invests in infrastructure projects within Nigeria. Again, minimum 20% in that fund. And that leaves you with 40%, and that's at the discretion of the board and management as to where to allocate that. What we did at the NSIA at the beginning was to allocate that on a 20-40-40 principle, with 20% in stabilization fund, 40% in the Future Generations Fund, and 40% in the Nigeria Infrastructure Fund. Now, the challenge then becomes how do you go about setting this up? Because also, do not forget there's also an entrepreneurial element to these funds. They didn't exist. You have to set up a business. And you have to realize that, first of all, these businesses must be sustainable and not just funds that anybody can dip their hands in. And unlike Ghana, we are not part of the fiscal framework. The NSI is run by an independent board of professionals and run by a management team that have clearly defined terms